Hope everybody's recovered from their Halloween binging. Did you eat any of your kids' candy there, Tom?
Yes, I probably had a few chocolate bars this morning already.
Yeah. Did they go out trick or treating, or did they do their own thing?
We did our own thing. We had some kids come and search for treats. It was a scavenger hunt for us. I'm not sure about you guys.
Yeah, we had the same thing. Neighborhood scavenger hunt.
Good.
For sure. Okay. Let's get into what we want to talk about, what we came here to talk about, why we are here. So first things first, let's just talk a little bit about ourselves. Producer Tim, do you think you can get up the PowerPoint for us? Thank you, sir. So what we want to talk about first is just who is presenting. So I'll talk a little bit about myself. I'm Keith Lawrence. I'm a Sioux Lookout lifer, certified engineering technologist. Talk a bit about my personal life. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Shannon. I have 2 kids. One was just recently born about 5 months ago. One of the kids is in daycare today, so that will definitely tone down on the background noise a bit. But if you do hear crying, someone is addressing the baby, so don't worry about that. I worked for about 12 plus years at Kuwait Naski, engineering consultant firm. Started as an engineering civil design technician, did a lot of drafting design, project management, but we moved on. We had an architect join us, and we need someone to help her. So I moved into that area. And as I did that, I had a little bit more experience in architecture, which kind of evolved my ways into housing, and an opportunity came up at Windigo. Took it in 2017, started as a housing inspector. I also got a member of the OBOA Sunset Country chapter, so shout out to anybody who's on here that's from that chapter. As well as I got thrown into the fire for the First Nation Housing Conference, and at first I thought my superior was throwing me into that because he wanted me to get some experience in the housing conference, but I later found out that he was just trying to get rid of it for himself and get me involved. But I got involved heavily, and we've been doing that ever since, and now it's kind of evolved into these webinars, which is awesome to see. We've been having great experiences with this. And then I also gained some experience with some housing workshops in our communities. We serve Windigo First Nations Council. We serve 7 communities, 5 full-time communities. And doing inspections, housing workshops, project management. I've had a fair bit of experience in the last 3 years learning how the housing evolves and works, and the conditions of the homes up in our communities. And as well, the main event, the guru, Tom Sayers, has joined me. So I'll let Tom, you can introduce yourself, and then we can get going.
Okay. So my name is Tom Sayers. I'm currently working for Windigo First Nations Council as the Water Hub Oro Fire Protection Director. So my positions has evolved a little bit in the last while. Just shortly after COVID, I kind of taken on some fire protection stuff, along with assisting our communities with water operations, technical support for the communities, review of their operations at water plants. I'm born and raised in Sioux Lookout, just like Keith, and I live here with my family, my 2 girls who were also not at my office, but they're at school right now. My educational background, I did schooling in civil technology, just similar to Keith. And I also took fire and protection through Seneca College in Toronto. So with those experiences, kind of carry over into the water and wastewater field. where I learned about pipe flows, pumps, all sorts of different things related to that could cross over into the water and wastewater field. So I started in Sioux Lookout as a forest firefighter, and when a municipal job came up as to work at their water and wastewater facilities, I jumped on it, and I was fortunate enough to break into the field of water and wastewater way back in not too long ago in 2008, and kind of bounced in and out doing that as part of the municipality of Sioux Lookout, and then I did some work within public works as public works supervisor for a period of time, so I understand, distribution, collection, the operations around public works in a municipal setting. And then I was employed by Northern Waterworks, operating the water plant here in Sioux Lookout. So currently in my position, I'm a Class 3 water plant operator. I have other certifications in distribution and collection. And with my municipal experience, I try and bring kind of my operational perspectives and regulatory knowledge to Windigo's 5 communities. So that's my role at Windigo.
Right on. Yeah. Thanks for joining me, Tom, too. It's nice to actually wear a dress shirt too. Are you rocking dress pants, or are you just in sweatpants? Because I'm rocking sweatpants though.
I made it to the office to participate in this call, so I figured I should put on some jeans and a collared shirt to look presentable.
That's right. Yeah, as people should know, we are working from home for the most part. But, okay, so we'll talk. Get that PowerPoint back up, and we could talk about what we're here to do. Why I got roped into doing this, and why I roped Tom into doing this. Okay, so talk first a bit about the overall concept. So we called it fixing the drip. We had a lot of pressure into naming this, and not a lot of time, and maybe we picked the wrong name. But I had a few comments on what the name sounded like, and so I guess we made an official announcement. We just want to make sure that we're not medical professionals. So just so everybody knows, we're not here to fix any personal issues you have. You got to seek a doctor for that. And we're not here to actually fix any plumbing issues. We're not here to fix any drips in your house. What we want to talk about is water in general, and water and how it relates to your home. We all know there's good and bad with water. The good is we're pretty aware of that, why we bring water into our house. We need to drink it. We want to survive on good, clean water, but there is bad water concept, and we want to just touch a little bit about how water can affect you in a negative way in your house, and then how that impacts you. And so we'll just go into how it impacts you, me, everyone that's living in a home, how it impacts your house in general, and the conditions of your home, the health of your home, and then how that also impacts, this is the specifics that we're going to get into, is how a different perspective on how it looks from your community perspective and from the water treatment perspective. And that's where we get Tom to have a good view on that, on what we look at when we look at water as from the water distribution system and treatment plant. So neat perspective. I certainly get interested when we talk about it, and hopefully everybody else does too. Okay, so first things first, we talk about leaks and or different areas of how water can affect a house. When I think of it, I think a little bit of, everybody does it. You think of dripping water from a tap, from the ceiling. Tom, anything come to mind as soon as you think of?
I think when I think of leaks in my own home, definitely being I'm not on a distribution system, but I'm on a well system where where the pump has to provide pressure to my house. So when I think of leaks, one big thing I see is toilets running, stuck toilets, dripping faucets, dripping shower heads, those types of things. That's where I see it in my house and in my personal spaces. And obviously the biggest one is probably toilets for usage.
Yeah. And I think, I have those issues in my house too, but there's different other ways that water can affect inside your house as well. I threw in the picture too, condensation. So, water not just coming from the pipes, you get the burst pipes, you get the leaky faucets, you get the failing controls, but you also can get the condensation that comes in through different areas, whether it's creeping its way in through the cold getting through the windows, or condensation even had some issues with service lines for toilets when when it penetrates the floor. I put a couple examples in here, but the condensation actually builds on the cold water that's coming in the pipe, and if you get a moist environment in the bathroom, a warm moist environment, you get that condensation. It'll drip into the floor and really it's surprising over time how much damage it does to that subfloor, and it creates that softness in the floor. And then there's another picture example here of a shower that the control started to leak and created a lot of damage. So that gives us examples of what we think about when we think about how the water can affect us, especially in leaks and condensation. Brings us to our first poll as we talk. So this is our symbol for poll. These are guys sliding down the pole. Poll time for our first question. And I think it's going to pop up here, but so other than leaks and showers, we also talk about water quality, and so that's something that definitely could affect. And what are ways that you could affect your water quality in your house there, Tom?
Yeah, so Keith and I talked quite a bit. We've talked about this and water quality in houses and looking at drips and leaks and certain things around your house that you may notice. And I think I'm going to touch back a little bit on maybe a little bit of condensation stuff just after this, because it reminded me of stuff with toilets that we talked about. But as for water quality in your houses, you may notice, and I know in some of the communities that I visit quite often, and we hear about it quite often, is discolored water. Discolored water in your house is actually a potential indicator of something that's occurring, whether it's in the distribution system, so the stuff that's outside of your house, or it may even be related to something inside your house. So if you woke up in the morning, you turned on your tap, and all of a sudden, let's just talk about cold water. You turn on your cold water tap, and the water comes out brown. One of the things that could lead up to you having brown water in your house, or an orange or stained color water, is actually a leak in the distribution system. Often you'll see your local water operators, they'll be out flushing hydrants, and the water turns quite stained and brown, and that's a process to remove that color. So with the high flow of water, and then you turn on your cold water tap, you may get that brown water pulled into your house. So the same goes with a leak. If there's a significant leak in the distribution system, there's a high flow, it disturbs the water in the pipes, and then you're actually pulling that water into your house. Now, as we all know, a leak doesn't show up right away, so this may be a good indicator of that. The other water quality things that we talk about inside of houses and we test for on a regular basis. In a community, we typically test weekly for what we call microbiological contaminants. The main ones we're concerned about in houses is bacteria, whether that's total coliforms or E. coli. Total coliforms is a good indicator of bacteria, and E. coli, as we all know is a major issue in distribution systems, both of which come from actually fecal contamination, which is kind of gross. So Keith and you and I were talking about some of the sources of those contaminations, and we thought we'd discuss it a little bit, even though this is about leaks. There's a couple of places that I see it in houses, which is on faucets, say in a kitchen. Often the threads, which if you take off the aerator off of your kitchen sink, there's threads that have a lot of gunk around the top, and that can be a source of microbiological contamination, which can eventually make you sick. So that's just one area. Cleanliness, obviously, in the bathroom, because of fecal contamination, is another potential source of bacteria into your home. So when you look at things like leaks, and Keith is probably more familiar about it than I am, and I'll get back to, say, condensation on toilets. If you have condensation on your toilet, which is too close to a wall, you transfer and you end up getting mold issues. So just like the slide that Keith showed of a shower faucet and all the black mold that's created by moisture. So we have potential microbiological contamination from fecal contamination that can make you sick, and then you also have the water feeding the mold issues. So I don't know if we wanted to kind of discuss that with the leaks and mold issues in the houses.
Oh, for sure. That kind of segues into, we talked about, but there's a few things that, how a leak and water issues affect a person in the house. And so directly in terms of like, why should you care about it, I guess is one thing. And for sure, one issue, if you have a leak, it could become a bigger problem in a quick amount of time. To a water issue, a condensation issue, same thing. We can really get into the fact that condensation could get into mold, the health of the home that affects someone, as well as if you get into the idea that mental health of something not being fixed or not addressed for a while, it can really wear on somebody, for sure. We'll touch on just what we're trying to do in terms of getting leaks repaired and issues repaired in community homes. But just an example, my own kitchen sink, I have, you're shutting the tap off, and I'm supposed to, we have, I'm guessing it's a leak on the hot water side, but you have to shut the kitchen sink tap off in a certain way where you delicately move it to the right and then down. And my wife doesn't like it, and she, it bugs her to no end, and she kept talking about it. We're talking about the mental health side, and so she slams it down, and I come up and say, no, you don't slam it down. You got to delicately close it, and and these are small things for us, but in the communities where you don't have hardware stores, you don't have that access, these small issues could really turn into something greater in terms of a negative impact on your mental side and your physical health.
Yeah, for sure. I see those leaks, and being in a few houses, there's often quite a few leaks, and there is like, how do we get them addressed effectively, and how much water is actually kind of just going down the drain. So there's a lot of little hidden things behind walls, stuff we don't see, leaks and crawl spaces and things like that. So I think that we have to identify or have a method of identifying that. Like, we're fortunate that we can go out and get those parts. I think often in the communities that isn't available to them. So I'm not quite sure of the method or maybe a procedure for getting these leaks fixed, especially in our communities that are remote communities.
Yeah, and it touches a bit about what we want to talk about next. Is just on how we're, as the tribal council, we try our best to try to improve the system and help address these. To give an example, I mean, I've done a few inspections now. I'm certain it's in the hundreds and 200s or whatever, but I looked at the data of what the houses that we've inspected, and it's about 65% or so that I've labeled as, now we don't go into specifics on plumbing issues, but we do go into specifics on major renovations needed or required, and that's in specific to faucets, sinks, bathtubs, and 65% or so need major repair. So major replacement that could relate to old, aging, need to be replaced, leaking, handles missing, and so you have no control over the water. The biggest issues are the ones that are actually running and you have no control over water, but there's a lot just don't use just because the controls are broken. So in terms of what we're trying to do to address these, because we know how it affects the person, we also know how it affects the house. Houses need to, the longevity of a house is important in terms of we can't just replace a home, and when we allow a leak or a problem to exist for a long period of time, that's what it comes down to. The repairs get so major that it becomes almost not worth it sometimes, and so addressing those as my job for sure. We definitely encourage recording and reporting, and it's just house to house. We're trying to implement. We did a couple of housing workshops, and which introduces the idea of a housing policy or agreement, I want to call it, but trying to get everybody to work together. And it's not something you can just work on with the leadership. It's not something you work on with the tech people, because we love to do that. We love to come up with solutions as a tech unit. But if no one else is involved in it, then it means nothing to everyone else. It just means something to us. It's a piece of paper we put on the desk. So we're trying to get to the point where we're implementing a system that almost becomes, I don't want to call it law, but it almost becomes law. It's part of the system, part of the community. Everybody knows about it. It doesn't matter who's in charge or who's in leadership, that encourages people. There's an easy way to report it, to bring it up. So whether it's inspecting certain times a year, twice a year, if we have a maintenance management system, which we're trying to encourage, or over reporting in terms of personal reporting. So sending a sheet, there's either kind of like what we have in the municipality, but you come, you pick up a sheet, you fill it out, you submit it, and it goes into a list of priority, and then there's a little bit more communication there of telling you when these items could be resolved. And then at your end, you're doing things at your end too, right, Tom?
That's right. So I agree. Like, there has to be a procedure put in place to get the leaks addressed, to make sure that the leak doesn't become something that basically destroys the house. You and I have talked about it many times, and I think if there's communication between water operations and the community, on my end, there are ways that we can actually see if there are leaks out in the community. I've given Keith you a bunch of data that we've looked at, and there's some trending and stuff like that, and there's just tools that water operators in the communities, if available to them, like SCADA systems, computers that track flows, things like that. We can work together if the lines of communication are open in the community to address these issues. So I'm not sure if we want to pull up a few more slides on that.
Yeah, actually, if we want to talk about that first, we'll go into our second poll of the day, which if you have a process for fixing leaks, it's a great question. It's something that we ask in our communities for sure. If we don't establish a policy, then the process is probably a bit unclear in terms of how you do it. And I think that what we really want to encourage is a phone call isn't enough. We need to have something in writing, and it's not just because it's addressing the leak, but it's also making us aware of a way of recording something that's there, and we're aware of what's out there, and we can establish even consistency. So knowing that we have a whole bunch of things that are the exact same type of issue, we can address it as a whole, and it's a lot easier to address that way than on an individual basis. And it's also the fact that sometimes when you ask for a repair, it's depending on the type of season, the time of season, you might not have someone working, and so it has to wait for quite a long time, and so you're relying on that voice recording, or the conversation you've had, to be recorded in a way that's filed and brought up at the right time when the plumber is on call or is back to work. So
yeah, I think for our communities, I really think it's important, like you said, to have a written process to identify the leak. I know I'm guilty, as probably a lot of people. You take a phone call and you say, yeah, I'll deal with it, but we forget. So yeah, I think it's quite important for our communities to have some kind of written process in place to deal with those issues.
Sure. Okay, so let's get into the interesting stuff. Interesting to me because it's a perspective that I certainly don't get a lot, and I'm guessing a lot of people viewing don't get a lot. So we'll bring up producer Tim. Can you bring up? Yeah, there we go. And so we'll get into a bit about. So what we did, we touched on a bit about policy and how we're trying to implement assistance in the communities to try to work together to develop a system of, and I'm going to call it reporting and recording, that really establishes a sustainable way of addressing these issues. At least establishing communication so everyone knows what's going on, and that's the easiest part. At least that addresses a bit of the mental health part of it, where you don't have a lingering repair that's needed and you have no idea when it's going to be repaired. Because I think that's something that's really affecting our communities for sure. And so now we're getting into Tom's graphics. So first, before you get into the specifics of it, Tom, just explain what we're looking at.
Yes, sure. So we're fortunate in the Windigo communities that we have SCADA systems. So a SCADA system essentially is like collecting data, and I'm able to look at trends and a whole bunch of lines, just as you can see on your screen right now. Operators tend to look a lot for patterns and numbers, patterns and lines. It's a daily thing, and once you look at it enough, you can kind of pick up on certain things and what's happening, and you can guess. You can make guesses on what's going on. This SCADA systems and water plants aren't available to everyone. If your local water plant doesn't have a SCADA system, I would highly recommend that you look for dollars to upgrade your system, because it just makes the operation, and especially with respect to leaks, a lot easier to determine if you have things going on, because you can compare data from yesterday, the day before, and in one case, I just compared data up to 10 years old. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a snapshot of a SCADA screen from a community.
So go through what lines are what if you go down.
Yeah, so when you look at the screen, the one that we're really looking at is distribution flow. So distribution flow, the blue line on the very bottom that's very jagged, is what's indicating how much flow is leaving the water plant to go out to the houses. When I look at this, and I hope everybody can see, I should say the light blue lines at the very top are the reservoir level. So if Keith points that out, yeah, so that's the reservoir level. So our level in our reservoir is going down. So that's the tank underneath the water plant that holds all the water is going down. So the water plant isn't making water at that time. There's water going out, but the water plant always doesn't make water. So the dark blue line at the bottom indicating the flow leaving the water plant, you can see it's jagged, it's up and down. And you know what, I'll point out a few things here for you, Keith. So as just above your pointer, you can see at about, this is probably, it's hard to see the time, but about 7 o'clock in the morning, you can see there's a little bit of a rise in flow, which is expected because everybody gets out of bed. You know, they get up, they brush their teeth, they make breakfast stuff. So that's part of the trend. The time period just before that is in the middle of the night. Barely anybody's up, barely any water usage. Somebody might get up, flush a toilet, a little bit of flow. Normal. This is a normal thing to see. Now, the time period just before that, we can see that for a few, maybe an hour or so, there's a steady flow leaving the water plant. It's very flat, doesn't go to the bottom. From this data that we can see, we can assume that there is probably a leak in that time period. So it may not be, when we think of leaks as a dripping tap or something like that, this one's probably not the case. What I attribute to these two is maybe somebody left the tap on. They went to the bathroom, it was dark, tried to turn off the tap, oh, it just didn't go all the way. Or there was a toilet leaking for that particular time. Somebody went back to the bathroom, realized the toilet was leaking, and stopped it by, say, jiggling the handle or whatever they did, or flushed it again and then went back to normal.
And so that gap there, that white gap, how much flow is that?
So in this case, in this water plant, I know it's a little bit hard to see the scale on the side, but that would be about 0.4 liters per second. So just from staring at data all the time and experience knowing what's leaking, what's running, 0.4 liters per second, I look at it and I say, it's probably a toilet running somewhere in the community. So if you have a small community of about 50 houses, your flow rate, you get to know the average, say a liter, for in this case, a liter a second to 1.2 liters a second. And if you're losing 0.4 just because of a running toilet, that's a large percentage of your water just being wasted that you have to catch up for. So,
and that, I mean, to give an example, like this is a 500 ml water bottle. 0.4 is roughly there, just a little under.
Yeah.
And that's per second. So you're dumping one of these out per second.
Every second you're dumping that out. Yeah, it's hard to like put it in perspective how much water a small leak can result in. So, you know, you and I were talking about how could we do this in our house? Like, how, if we had a dripping tap in our house, how could we actually see how much water that was? So I said, well, if you took a juice jug, a 1 liter juice jug, and your tap is dripping in your kitchen from the faucet, and you put that jug underneath there and you timed how long that took, you'll begin to realize that that little drip really adds up to a lot of water in the end. So we have a few other examples of this if we want to look at them. I find it really interesting. This is the same plant. As you can see, all the trend is the same, but for a very, very long period of time, almost a 24-hour period, the flow, the dark blue line in the bottom, never reaches zero. So even in the period of time at night that I showed you where it went to zero on the other day, it does reduce. It's not as jagged, but it never ever reaches zero. So there's a constant steady flow leaving the water plant going somewhere. This could be a garden hose. It could be somebody decided this time of year, hey, I'm scared of my pipes freezing, so I'm going to just turn my tap on a little bit. And it adds up. And I can see it through the SCADA system at the water plant that this is occurring, which is kind of a neat tool to have. So this one might be about 0.5, 0.6 liters a second. And we think, well, that's not too much water. It isn't.
Yeah.
But this water plant in particular can only make a finite amount of water. I cannot force more water through a filter. I can only, there's a maximum amount. And this plant can make a maximum of 2.3 liters a second. So when you take 0.5 or 0.6 into factor, you know, you're approaching a time where you cannot keep up, and your reservoir, you'll deplete your reservoir to nothing, and you will have no water for your community members. So that's the importance of finding these little leaks and identifying them.
And that's a good fact, because, you know, everybody looks at the lake and, oh, we have tons of water or whatever, but you can only produce so much at a time.
Yeah. So at a water plant, we have so much storage, and we have to replenish that storage.
You can see that blue line, that light blue line is increasing there, so that the reservoir is.
That's correct. So we're increasing the amount of water in the reservoir. There's periods of time when it goes down and when it goes up. So now your reservoir, you have to, if you have hydrants, your reservoir has to be available for fighting fires as well. So there's a bunch of different things at play where we need to make sure that that reservoir is full at all times. But if we have a lot of little leaks depleting the reservoir and we can't keep up, we get into life safety issues where we cannot fight a fire. We're constantly chasing ourselves to just supply water to the residents for drinking, cleaning, hygiene, and then we lose out on the fire end. So we can try another slide as an example.
Well, that's our poll cue, so we'll do our third poll.
Okay.
While we talk.
All right. So yeah, there's it's not just water for drinking, and like you said, you look out and we have tons of water out available to us. That water is brought into the water plant. It's treated. It's stored in a specific amount, and then that reservoir and that reservoir is depleted, and then we have to replenish that by treating more water. So even though there's a lake out there that we're taking it from that looks like a ton. When we have leaks, we can only physically process that water at a certain rate. So every little leak that's putting pressure on that filtration system, if it has to run we like to run 12 hours a day making water, so we have a little bit of a buffer for leaks or for peak flow, we'll call it, where maybe there's a baseball tournament going on and there's about 100 more people in the community, so we have the capacity to make enough water. So we have that safety. Now, if we have a whole lot of leaks, a whole lot of household leaks that are easy to fix, the ones that aren't underground, that we don't know where they are, there is methods of finding them, but we don't know where they are. If we limit the amount of little leaks, then we have sufficient amount of water for the community. So we want to run 12 hours a day, not 24 hours a day. If we get into a 24-hour a day period, we may end up in a situation like, I think from what I've read and heard, a community like Nishkanaga right now, who is being evacuated, they were unable to maintain enough flow from their water plant to keep up with the demand of the community. Therefore, at a period of time, the distribution flow is zero. They're actually making water to replenish the reservoir, but you have to physically shut off the flow to the community. There's other things that case there where there's contamination, but that's where we get into when we physically cannot provide safe drinking water because we can't make enough for the demand, and then we shut it off. And I think this is the case in quite a few communities. One of our communities has had to do the same thing due to significant leaks outside of houses, but we did have a discussion about looking in the houses to make sure that we don't have running toilets, leaking faucets. Those were the easy ones to find first. The ones in the ground that are buried are the hard ones. So this is where it gets interesting about household leaks and major distribution leaks and how it affects how much water is leaving the plant.
It gives you a neat perspective. I think it especially helps in terms of, if somebody's watching or listening to you talk about water and water treatment, how does it directly relate to them? And I think that you touched on one, just life safety, right? I mean, it's that's one for sure. And the fact that people, if they do rely on the drinking water, which a lot of people hope to, if they can't produce it too. And so I think that's two good facts there. You had a couple more examples on the slides, right?
Yeah, there's a couple more communities that I think we're burning through the time here, but I'll let's see what I can find here for us here. I'll just quickly, this water plant, very, very similar to the last slides we looked at. You notice that it never goes to zero. So in this case, it was actually a known service piped to someone's house that was leaking at the curb stop. Again, the scale is hard to see, but it was about 0.4 to 0.5 liters per second. After the repair, you can see the difference in the trend line. It's going down. It's almost to zero. We can expect a few little leaks here and there, but we made a significant change to how much water was leaving the plant. You can see it here. So here's with a leak. It's very flat on the bottom, never goes to zero. Here it's flat. It's almost at zero. We have a slight leak somewhere, but because they fixed the leak, hey, we're saving a lot of water.
Yep.
Here's another facility. This is the facility in one of the communities where we're just really concerned about the red line on here with flow. It's a larger community, lots of flow leaving the plant. You can see at night where the lines are low and jagged. That's periods of low flow. And then at about 7 o'clock in the morning, the flow picks up and this is people are using water. So they actually use about 2.2 to 2.3 liters per second throughout the day. This big spike in is actually a truck fill. So they have a truck fill station that hauls water. So I can pick that up from here. The same community had multiple leaks underground, and we were having a serious issue with trying to keep up with flow. In this case, we actually had to shut down the distribution system because we could not maintain levels in the reservoir. The reservoir on this one is represented by the green and yellow parallel line. So same community at night. Notice how at night it's not as jagged. So they're having a little bit more consumption at night. This may be due to household leaks, maybe a running toilet or two, a dripping faucet, etc. So we can say, hey, they got something going on, but it's not real serious. And this one, I've removed everything else just so that you can see it a little bit better. This is a 1 week period for the same water plant, the same graph that we were just looking at. You can see, obviously, hey, we got some big leaks going on because the low never goes below about 3 liters a second. This plant is rated for 7 liters a second, which is quite unrealistic. It's an older plant, needs an upgrade. Realistically, we can only maintain a 24-hour flow of about 4.2 liters a second. So we were constantly losing water until we found the leak. So you can see how this really affects where we can see it at the water plant when things are going on. Now you ask, well, why is this important for the water plant? A lot of it has to do with when you're having to operate a water plant 24 hours a day, there's associated cost to it. The costs increase drastically. Energy costs is the biggest thing. A water plant might spend $5,000 to $10,000 a month just on hydro costs to run equipment. Maintenance costs, more wear and tear on equipment. Chemical costs, more. You have to use more chemical, more chlorine to treat the water, various chemicals. So the financial burden on the community becomes that much greater the longer you have to run that water plant to provide water for the community.
Which is a vicious cycle, because if we fix the leak, we're to spend the money to fix the leak, we're spending it to treat the water.
That's correct. So to run the plant longer to treat water will, over a long period of time, will never, in my opinion, be less financial responsibility than actually fixing small leaks. To fix a tap, $150, something like that. To operate a plant 24 hours a day, as I just said, $5,000 to $10,000 in energy costs. I mean, that is a much greater expense to the community than it is to operating than to actually fix the leaks that are present.
Nice. Well, that's a good way to close it, I think. So we want to open up to question period, and I'm hoping this is going to be nice and easy on how to operate this. But so if we have any questions, please come forward. And we got something coming in here, but
I know we talked a little long. We could go.
We got to get a phase 2 here.
Yeah, we could keep going on and on. There's so much to deal with water plants and leaks in the houses.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a one question: treated water versus non-treated water. you tend to struggle with that for sure, in trying to convince people that treated water is better for you.
Yeah, yeah. There is times in the communities. I think it's a whole issue with being on boil water advisories for such a long time and trusting the treated water that's being provided to the communities. So because we've had so many issues with boil water advisories, to regain that trust in the function of the plant and that it is safe to drink, and we have all these things in place to do it, I think that's a big factor in everything. It's like it's prolonged periods of boil water advisories that are not good.
Oh yeah. And I know that even when we're in career fairs, you have conversations with people about that, and we go over just, okay, we do have a question. So from Liz, is it a good idea to use a drain catcher that catches material from going down your sink to help stop plugging? Interesting. Well, yes. In simple terms, yes.
Yeah, it is a really good idea. One of the things that I encounter, because I deal with sewage issues as well, is that along with leaks in houses, is the proper use of drains. So a drain catcher catches all the large particles that could get clogged in your pipes and cause backups. And if you have a leak in your house that's putting water down the drain as well, and you have a backup at the same time, you could possibly have flooding in your crawl space or in your house, or many other issues related to sewer. So yes, of course, like putting something to catch debris. The biggest part is not putting grease down your sink, because that creates major issues in collection systems, in the pipes and the manholes and everything that leading to where that's treated. And so grease, debris catchers, and not flushing things that say they're flushable, but in all reality are not flushable, such as things like dental floss, paper towels, diapers,
baby wipes.
Baby wipes are terrible, and feminine products. Those are just all things that we encounter in sewer systems. So if you have a leak and it's blocked, we may end up with further issues with sewage backing up because your leak is adding to the problem.
Good. And I did get one more comment about the name. Obviously, we picked the wrong name, but people were surprised about what we talked about. But very interesting. So thanks for that compliment too.
Yeah, I noticed there was one question from Darlene. It was about leaks. I think we talked about that, and like it wasn't so much fixing the leaks; it's having a process in place to get the leaks fixed and how they're affecting the water plants in the communities, the amount of water financially. Yeah, it wasn't so much how to fix the tap or something like that.
And we did put a disclaimer on that at the beginning. We're not fixing leaks, but yeah, I know it's good, and that's I mean that's part of what we have to do in terms of we're not going in there and doing the hands-on stuff, but we're trying to help identify and make it easier to organize the hands-on stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what we talked about, having a process in place, especially in remote communities, in all communities, like a process to get your leaks addressed, get it on paper. Let's fix this, because it's only going to lead to household structural issues, financial burden at water plants of having to operate harder, things like that. Like, I think that's one of the biggest parts of everything.
One more question. We'll take it from Miguel Queequish. Hey, Miguel, by the way, nice to see you on here. He was asking what program you were using just for the water treatment analysis.
like SCADA system and stuff like that. So in our communities, we use Rockwell software. You can search it online. RSView Rockwell. There's many other companies that provide SCADA software. Other ones that I'm familiar with are Wonderware. Wonderware is good. Important to us, each one does it a little bit differently. It's to learn how it functions and how you can manipulate data. So I can turn things on and off. So if you talk to a programmer or somebody assists your communities with your water systems, they would be able to give you a good idea of who they use and what kind of software they use. We use typically Rockwell and Wonderware.
Okay. And one more, just Darlene asked, are the reservoirs continuously full and how are they checked?
So in our water plants, there's a device. They make them, there's various ones, but we use they're called ultrasonic level indicators. It uses sound to bounce off of the surface of the water and it measures the distance. In a typical water plant, we only want to deplete the water plant a certain amount. We say, I would like it to go down a meter. So our water plant fills, shuts off, depletes a meter, turns back on, fills it back up. And it's just a cycle like that. So it's different. The reservoirs aren't continuously, let's say, full to the maximum, but at a certain point, it turns on and shuts off as water is demanded from the community.
Yeah. All right.
And I should say, with a SCADA system, I can track that. That was the light blue lines that Keith was pointing out before. I can monitor that because we're fortunate that we have SCADA systems.
Okay, I do have one more question filtering in here. How many different systems in water treatment plant are there? And a brief explanation of the different classes of a water treatment plant. It's from Mark.
That's quite a significant question because there's so many different treatment systems. For our plants in Windigo, we have a treatment system called a membrane treatment system. There's nanofiltration, which is membrane, RO systems that are membranes. There's conventional treatment. There's dissolved air flotation treatment. There is a multitude of systems or ways of treating water. I'm not going to say which one's better or what's this one's the best. I like working with this one the best. I think for each treatment system, a good process of design, getting an engineer on board, getting the right people to construct it. We rely on those people to tell us what treatment is best for the source water quality that we have. So, for instance, Bearskin Lake might have different. Bearskin Lake, which is kind of beside Satchko Lake. Satchko Lake is a very brown, stained chocolate milk lake. Bearskin Lake is dark, but not silty. The same system isn't going to be used in each one of those communities. Generally, the process will be the same, but source water quality is going to determine what plant is going to be there. And then as for classes of water treatment plant, something that's a little bit more complex, maybe like a class 3 water plant, like a membrane treatment plant with UV, GAC at the end, all this stuff. The more complex the plant and how dirty the source water quality is determines the classification. Well, a well treatment system might be a class 1. You might have a couple filters, a small UV system. So a small drinking water system might be a class 1. So to answer the full question, it'd be a whole discussion in itself.
Right on. Okay, well, thanks again for everyone for joining us. That kind of brings us to an end. And so I just want to make sure we mention that you visit our, I do have on the slide there, Producer Tim, if you want to pull up the slide again. but you can visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/FNHC.com, well, FNH.com, as well as registering for other webinars online at firstnationhousingcommunity.com. Be sure to give us a feedback, ask for new topics and other upcoming webinars. Share if you see any webinars come your way, make sure you share and pass it on. We really appreciate you coming to experience this with us, and allow Tom to talk, because he's dying to talk sometimes. But.
Yeah, I think okay, I got to get a last word in.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
I think there's probably going to be a lot of extra questions. I'm not sure if my email address was included. I can't remember.
We didn't have that in there, no. So maybe we'll find a way of posting that post webinar.
Yeah, so if anybody has any further questions, you know, I'm supporting our communities. I contact other First Nation Council representatives who do the same job that I do. We talk about stuff. We throw stuff by each other. Technical questions. You know, I have this issue here. Have you seen this before? You know, as water operators and OROs of water systems, we don't know the answer to everything. I can't see it. Well, almost. I am not a technical expert in everything. So we rely on each other to really support each other, support the communities. So if you have any questions, I try and find answers. I don't know everything. That's for sure.
Awesome. Thanks again, Tom, for volunteering your time to do this. Appreciate it.